Greetings, friends, and welcome back to the Creation Reformation YouTube channel. A couple of things to talk about today. There's a few items that I just wanted to update you guys on. I've continued to try and build this platform to be almost a resource for you to keep on tabs with creationism and the workings of creation science. And there's been a lot going on recently, actually. So we're going to dive right into it and talk about some of the updates. So kind of three parts of the agenda for this video. First, I'm going to kind of react to something interesting that happened this week that is particularly of interest to me and for a variety of reasons. And then it's a new upcoming film being put out by a creation apologetics ministry. And so I wanted to talk about that. Second, a new paper has dropped from the Creation Research Society Quarterly magazine, which I am subscribed to. So I get updated on their I'm a paying member of Creation Research Society, so I get their journals as soon as they're out. And so I want to talk about that and really just fill you in on what the whole controversy is behind this paper and how it might shift the balance of, not balance of power, but balance of interpretation among the creationist community as to one of the most controversial and most talked about fossils ever discovered. So with that, let's get right into it. Just a couple of things to cover for today, and then yeah, we'll wrap it up. So the first thing is basically this week on Monday, a trailer dropped for an upcoming film being put on by Cedarville University, as well as a group called Genesis Apologetics. Now, Genesis Apologetics is mostly known for their short videos where they put on these little skits of students in a classroom basically refuting their teachers when their teachers teach about evolution.
I was just pointing out that the Bible is just a collection of myths.
What about the Dead Sea Scrolls?
And I've never actually been a fan of those videos. They usually misrepresent evolution one way or another, and they're also just extremely hard to watch. Like they're not well acted. They're very cringy. I have nothing against Genesis Apologetics. They've helped me a lot in my creationist journey in terms of some of the content that they have that is more educational. So they have videos where they break down and explain things that I've used before to kind of update myself on certain creation models. So they do have good resources out there, but what they're mostly known for, unfortunately, is this their short videos. So that's kind of what they're mostly known for, unfortunately, but they do have some good materials. But what they most recently have put out is something very interesting that actually a friend of mine who is in the creation movement, he basically reached out to me on Monday and said, hey, you check this out. They kind of stole your idea. And I, just not to get too deep into like where I was when I discovered this link to this video, but I was like in the middle of playing basketball. I was playing pickup basketball, and I just saw the message between games, and I was like, what in the world? So I click on it, and this trailer pops up for this new movie, and it's kind of a semi-sequel to a film called The Ark in the Darkness. And I almost always say The Ghost in the Darkness because that's a different film, but it's The Ark in the Darkness, and it's about Noah's Ark and explaining all of it. It uses a lot of animation to kind of depict the events of Noah's flood, and then it has a bunch of creation scientists talk about it. So that came out in 2024, and I did watch it. I know it went into theaters for a couple of days in most areas. I don't think it was in a Showtime near me, but I did watch it when it came out. Thought there were some things that got right and some things that I didn't love about it. But that one was also related to Cedarville University, and then was also put on by Answers in Genesis. So a lot of the scientists and the speakers in that film are from Answers in Genesis. And I mean, you can watch it and learn a little bit about the creation flood model. Andrew Snelling is in it, and I'm a huge fan of Andrew. Like I like Andrew Snelling a lot, and so he kind of represents himself well. But in terms of filmmaking, and I am a movie guy, and if I'm breaking it down in terms of like how well it's filmed, It's very dark in a lot of places. It looks like a green screen behind them. Some of them sometimes are filmed inside the Ark in Kentucky, and just the lighting isn't very great. You're supposed to, you should, if you're interviewing someone, you should have some lights on behind them so you can kind of see where they're at. And it just didn't do a great job of a lot of those things. But really, it's only useful. And I didn't love a lot of the animation stuff, but it's only useful if you really just want a basic understanding of the flood story and how scientists kind of put it in perspective. So again, Andrew Snelling I thought was great, but a lot of the other people in it, and the quality of the film and things like that didn't quite hold up to scrutiny. But anyway, I'm not talking about that movie. I'm talking about this one. So I watched this trailer for this kind of pseudo sequel to The Ark in the Darkness, and it is very similar to something that I wrote for the Creation Reformation blog. So if you remember, I made a video about this where I was making these satire articles called Satire Saturday, and I've published 2 of them on the blog so far. And the first one that I did was Noah giving a post-flood press conference. So the idea of the satire is it's supposed to be funny. I don't know. You can read it on the Creation Reformation blog, and there's a lot of kind of hidden jokes there for people who know the flood story. There's some really deeper jokes for people who are specifically in creation science, but there's enough jokes, and like I just try to kind of play it off as funny. I made the reporters look kind of silly and dumb because they're asking silly questions to Noah to try and make the flood story, because it's a very fantastic story in the Bible in terms of believability. I was trying to make it a little bit more believable by throwing a lot of questions at Noah as if this was like a post-game press conference to a coach. And, reporters are notorious for asking stupid questions. And so I was trying to kind of combine those and make a satire article. Well, then lo and behold, this trailer comes out for this movie that is coming out this year. And before I say anything else, I'm just prefacing that I wrote this article about Noah giving a post-flood press conference, and then just a couple of weeks later, I get sent this trailer, and I'm going to pull it up right now so we can kind of watch it together.
I'm kind of a big picture person, so I would like to set some context. In the early chapters of Genesis, there's a couple places with genealogies. Where do you fit into that list? And how old were you at the time of the flood?
I was 10 generations after Adam. I was 600 years old when the floodwaters came.
How is that even possible?
Okay, so it starts with someone asking questions, and then you get I tried to pause it on him, but I was a little late. Can I back it up, maybe? So this is an AI-generated, realistic-looking Noah in like a modern suit, dressed. He's in a conference room, like kind of as if he's teaching a class, and he's answering questions people throw at him about the flood. So again, this colleague of mine knew I wrote this article, and he sent me this trailer because it's like the same exact premise as my satire article. Now, before I'll play the rest of the trailer, but before I do, the reason why this was a little surprising to me, I had to make this decision when I was putting together a satire article. Now, an atheist could very easily make a satire article and make Noah and his family look stupid and make the reporters look smart. And I was almost tempted to throw that in a little bit and make everybody kind of look silly. But I'm a creationist and I believe the flood story, so I couldn't make Noah look like an idiot. In order to make the flood story, in order to make this an apologetic for the flood story, you need to make sure that the people asking the questions are either, in my case, the dumb ones, and they're asking stupid questions and then they're being refuted. But the goal of satire is to make a point. And the point is that there's a lot of questions thrown at the flood story, but really, when you really break them down, this flood story is actually a lot more believable than you realize. And if you had lived through the flood, right? If you had lived and saw the flood and saw everything happen, and then just a few generations later, your great grandkids, because you live a long time, your great grandkids start doubting the flood story, you'd be really ticked off at them, and you would answer their questions. You start to kind of refute them, be like, no, you're the dumb ones for doubting this story. So I get that it's a fantastical story, but at the end of the day, if I believe the flood story to be true and actually believable, then I need to make the reporters on that end be the ones who are, wrong on this side. So if you're going to take the premise of Noah seriously, you have to do this very carefully because you are on the side of Noah here. So I think it works with a satire where I can laugh at the satire and laugh at the reporter's questions, in terms of my article. But here you're treading in interesting waters because you're putting Noah up on a stage, and you have to make this so that when you watch it, you're not laughing hysterically at Noah and thinking Noah is a stupid one. So I'm surprised to see someone take this premise seriously. I feel like this premise fits a lot better with a satirical edge to it.
I have a big question.
And I hate the way AI looks.
Okay,
All the
I've
AI
heard
looks.
enough of this nonsense. Are you guys really believing this?
Adam and Eve had perfect genes. No mutations. Nothing.
The thing I'm still not getting is why do we find fossils all around the world buried in a pattern?
He gave me the plans for building the perfect ark to get us through to the other side.
Starting at the beginning, right when the flood began, I really want to gain a real understanding of what it was like for you guys.
The downstream consequences of Adam and Eve's sins were much greater than anyone could possibly imagine.
So I don't understand why. So I do understand that if you're going to show stuff of the flood, you're going to show, what it was like before the flood and all the cultures, and you're going to get into that. I understand that you have to use animation and even some AI generated stuff. You don't have to use AI, but you do have to use animation. I don't understand why they had to make Noah AI. I don't know why you can't find an actor who can play Noah. And so Genesis Apologetics actually did make a film called, what was it called? It was similar to this idea. It was a professor who gave a presentation on evolution, and then a student gets up on stage and asks him questions, and they had actors playing. Now, the acting was terrible. The movie was terrible. It was called Genesis Impact is what it was called. It was just the worst. It was the worst hour or hour and a half, whatever length it was. It was the worst hour of my life. It was unbearable. And it just, I don't even want to get into that. It was terrible. But I would take actors acting poorly over, because if you put AI, it's just distracting. So if you think of, and I don't want to make this whole video about AI, but I just remember even when they started using CGI actors or CGI characters in movies, I remember Rogue One. You went into theaters for Star Wars, the Star Wars movie Rogue One, and the General Grand Moff Tarkin, because the actor had passed away, they brought him back in CGI, and he looked almost real. But the fact that there was just a little bit where you could tell that he was CGI, and it was completely distracting, right? And they did it with Princess Leia at the end too. Very distracting. So I know if you can't find people who can act, that's too bad, but I wouldn't resort to, it's still better than just doing this in AI generated. So I don't know. I really don't know the reasoning behind basically all of this.
Have no idea. If you could go back in time and see what I saw, you would get on your knees and beg God to push the reset button.
So with this point, I'm a little, the story of Noah, this is something I got feedback on because I didn't want to just write a satire article about Noah and then just publish it. I wanted to get feedback. And so I sent it around to a few people and just want to make sure I was, not going way off the beaten path or saying anything I shouldn't be saying. And one of the things that someone pointed out to me was the story of Noah is one of hope, right? That God should have wiped out all creation or at least all humanity, but because of how wicked they were. But he had mercy and he preserved some of them to keep the covenant going. He could have, and the reset button there, that's, I feel like what a reset button would be, is you actually wipe out all of humanity. But he didn't wipe out all humanity. He kept some of the humans alive. And so his covenant was still established with a few humans. He didn't actually hit the reset button. And so the point of the story of Noah is actually one of salvation and hope. And it doesn't seem like that when most of the world gets wiped out. But again, the people were so wicked, and I know that's the point that the movie is making, is the people were so wicked, you would be okay with wiping them out if you were there, if you saw what I saw, right? If you saw what Noah saw, you would want them to be wiped out too. But again, that's putting the emphasis on, and I was guilty of it when I started writing the article, but it's putting the emphasis on the wrong thing. You're putting the emphasis on the judgment because everybody going into your movie, if they're a skeptic, then they're going to be like, why would God kill so many people? Why would he destroy the creation that he made? And so they're going to really stress the apologetic of, well, the humans were really wicked, and if you saw them, you'd want them destroyed too. But that's not really the point. The point is, they were so wicked, God should have wiped out everything and started over. But he didn't. He saved a remnant, right? And that's why Noah survived. So a little bit of the wrong emphasis there, in my opinion. But that's more of a nitpick. Overall, I just don't see the point for this. And I want to clarify, again, I made something similar. It was a similar premise, but I did it completely differently. I was one article, and it was satirically done, right? It was supposed to just make you laugh. It was more of like a skit. If this was a comedy, and you had an actor up there answering questions, it was like a Babylon Bee video or a Saturday Night Live type video where you have an actor up there playing Noah, and it's basically the script of my article, of my satire paper, or an equivalent thing. You know, you can write it yourself. I'm not saying what I wrote is going to be better than what someone else writes. You know, that's fine. You can do that. But this is just, it's AI, which I don't like. It doesn't look great. And then I don't understand kind of the point of it. And now, of course, now that you get to the apologetics part, I think they actually have the wrong focus in some areas. So there's really a lot to critique in this trailer. But I'll finish it off. I won't say anything more. I'm talking more than just the trailer. We should watch the rest of it. One of the AI people crying.
Okay. Knowing this, first of all, that in the last days mockers will come with their mocking. Noah?
So I really don't want to just be a hater and hate on it. This is being made by creationists. I'm a creationist. We're all on the same side here. And I was kind of hypercritical in my reaction. But I want to talk about it because, again, I just did something very, very similar in terms of the concept, the main concept, which is what would happen if a bunch of people got to ask Noah all the questions that we're asking today about the story. And while that premise is interesting, I think it can be executed in very few ways. And I think making it an AI film that has flashbacks and shows things happening in the flood story, I don't know. I think you're treading in uncertain territory there. And so I'll probably watch it, maybe. I mean, I watched The Ark in the Darkness, and again, I had some good things to say about The Ark in the Darkness, and I don't want to be all negative. Genesis Apologetics has done some things that are really helpful and are very good resources. And I think part of this is they're trying to stay on top of the AI game, right? They want to compete with all the other resources out there, and AI is going to be the thing to do it. So I'm not just saying on Genesis Apologetics. There's a Darren Aronofsky movie that's coming out that is about like the revolution, and it's all AI. The whole thing is AI, and then just the people's voices. And I hate that. Like I hate that with every fiber of my being, especially as someone who would have loved a movie about the revolution. This is the 250th year of America. And so I would love to see a movie about the revolution. Just making it AI is kind of a losing battle plan from the start. So not a fan of that. But there you go. So there's a trailer out of a new creation-based film about Noah. And you can tell I'm not a fan, but I'm not like telling you not to watch Genesis Apologetics. That's just my take. So it's just the way you go about things. I don't hate Genesis Apologetics. I don't hate what they're trying to do. And I don't hate apologetics ministries, but I just think they need to be more refined in their approach. So that was the first thing I want to talk about. The second is a little more scientific. So Creation Research Society Quarterly they've now published their latest journal, and basically it has a paper in it that is going to really, it's already doing this, but it's going to really shake the creationist world. So it has to do with the fossil Lucy, which is Australopithecus afarensis. It's an Australopithecine species. And the famous Lucy fossil, right, that was discovered, that was the ape man, the transitional form between apes and humans. And for a long time, there were basically two approaches you could take to Lucy. The first is that Lucy was a transitional form. It was an ape species that walked upright. Okay, it had an ape skull, it had an ape brain, it had a lot of ape features, but instead of walking on all fours, it was bipedal. It walked on 2 feet like humans do. And that was a question in evolution at the time, was what evolved first between apes and humans? Was it our intelligence? Did our intelligence evolve and then we walked upright? Or do we walk upright first and then evolve intelligence? That was a big question that they had. And so Lucy actually answered that question for the evolution community, which is that bipedality evolved before intelligence. So that was the discovery. So that was one interpretation. Then the creationist interpretation was they basically looked at the fossil and they said, yes, the brain is like an ape and all these features are like an ape. This is an ape. And it walked on all fours. And they basically reinterpreted some of the fossil evidence that Lucy was bipedal. And so those were our two examples. Lucy was either a ape that walked on 2 legs, it was bipedal, or it was an ape that walked on all fours. And by the way, some creationists have actually accepted that Lucy was an upright walking ape. They said, okay, this was an ape. She clearly walked on 2 legs. And part of the reason for the idea that she walked on 2 legs is the leg bones, the femur, actually has this curve to it. And that's what happens if you're walking upright, then your center of weight is on the very center. It's down the middle, right? When you're standing upright, your entire body's weight is straight down right between your legs, right? It's between your feet when you're standing. That's where your center of weight is. And so when you stand that way, you're putting a lot of weight on, and your legs are not immediately under your weight. It's on either side. So as you grow, actually, and as you learn to walk and you start walking more and more and more on 2 legs, your femurs actually curve slightly. And so Lucy's femur actually had that characteristic curve. If you set up her femur, it would look a lot more like a human femur versus an ape femur, which is just a lot more straight because the ape doesn't actually walk on 2 legs except for in rare instances for temporary amount of time. So there were creationists who accepted that and said Lucy was a bipedal ape. And in fact, those creationists would say all Australopithecines, right, the whole family of ape fossils, they were all upright walking apes. That's what characterizes that family. They were a family of apes that are now extinct that walked upright in a similar manner as humans. But that sounded a little bit like conceding to human evolution, right? It concedes that there were apes that look like they're in between a chimpanzee, for example, and a modern human. And so a lot of creationists have said, no, we're misinterpreting the data, and this was a ape that walked on all fours. But now there's a few scientists in the creation community who have just published in Creation Research Society Quarterly, and they did present at the CRS conference this past summer. And they are saying that Lucy is a pygmy human, a isolated population of humans that were small. And we already know of some pygmy humans. There are populations. There was an extinct population of humans called the hobbits. They actually named them hobbits because they're small. So they're named after the hobbits from Tolkien's literature. So let me pull this up here. This is a paper. Here we go. Here is the paper. It's by Christopher Rupe. And so he says the article proposes, this is kind of in the summary, the article proposes the pygmy human hypothesis, arguing that the fossil Lucy, Australopithecus afarensis, was not an extinct ape, but rather a genetically isolated, small-bodied adult human belonging to a pygmy population that lived in East Africa. This perspective is introduced as a third option beyond the traditional creationist views that Lucy was either a quadrupedal ape or an ape that walked upright. So this entire paper is going to support the premise that Lucy was a pygmy human. And there's a couple of different arguments to be made here. And I'm not a paleontologist. I'm not an anthropologist. I'm not an expert in this. I'm just giving you the facts of what is being proposed in the creation community. So Basically, here is a comparison of the pelvic girdles in ape and hominid species. The top row is an American, Indian, so a Native American, indigenous, Indian, whatever you want to call them. And then there's a Neanderthal. And then there's a fossil from a pit of bones site in Spain. And that's a chimpanzee. So we've got here American Indian, a Neanderthal, which virtually all creationists believe is a human. We believe Neanderthals were humans. And then we have a chimpanzee here. So look, the humans obviously look much similar to one another. These are both humans, Neanderthal, human, modern human, Homo sapiens. And then a chimpanzee looks a lot different. Here's the bottom row. We have Lucy right here, Homo erectus, which most creationists say is human. I never want to say all, but I'm pretty sure it's virtually all would say Homo erectus is human. And then we have a chimpanzee. Wait, no. Below Lucy, Homo erectus, and modern Homo sapiens. Sorry, I misread that. Modern Homo sapiens. So Lucy is bottom row right here. And you can very clearly see that Lucy's pelvic girdle looks very similar to all the other human pelvic girdles. The chimpanzee one looks quite different. So she seems to fit right in with the humans. And so again, the creationists who believe that she was a quadrupedal ape would say that, I believe their argument is that Lucy wasn't put together the right way, that there was some bias in the way the scientists put the bones together, and that they actually put the pelvis together incorrectly. But the creationists who argue, the new creationists who argue that she was a upright walking ape, would say they put it together correctly. And Christopher Rupe is now siding with them, is now siding with the new creationists in terms of the pelvic girdle. So there you go. I'm giving you a brief overview. I'm not an expert. I can't speak in depth on all this. I'm just giving you what's this whole controversy about. Here is her sacrum and her coxae. I don't even know how to pronounce these words. I am no expert. I studied animals in college. But these are original diagrams from the first scientists, the evolutionist scientists who discovered Lucy. This is from them. So that's Johansen. So he's not getting this from a secondary source. This is what the primary source reported. All right, here we go. Here is the bones that I was talking about, the leg bones. So this is the angle. So you can see when you put a human femur down on a table and you just lay it down, it's actually going to be slanted. Okay, you can see that right there. It's called the bicondylar angle. And because I'm a total nerd, again, I'm not an anthropologist, but I wanted to understand the Lucy fossil. I actually did sit down one time and I sketched the human femur, the Lucy femur, and the chimpanzee femur. I just sketched them and I just Googled them, found pictures of them, sketched them. And you can see the chimpanzee femur is just straight up. You can literally rest on a table and it'll point straight up. But the Australopithecus afarensis, the Lucy bone, also has a bicondylar angle. So Christopher Rupe, who believes that Lucy is a pygmy human, is now going to side with the creationists who believe that Lucy was an upright walking chimpanzee. He's going to side with them on every argument that the creationist makes that says that she was an upright walking ape. But then he's going to separate off from them when it comes to the features of Lucy that make her look like a chimpanzee. So, for example, there's more of the sacrum. This is the part, by the way, that the creationists who believe she was quadrupedal, they would say that the pelvis and the coxae, again, I don't know how to pronounce it, the pelvis and the coxae were put together incorrectly, according to those creationists. So it's put together right now to make it look like she was an upright walker. And they're going to say, well, no, we would put it together differently to make it look more like a chimpanzee. Now, by the way, I am no expert on this, as I keep saying, but when I really talk about it, there are scientists, okay, that are PhD level scientists who specialize very specifically in just this exact area. And so when creationists often, kind of lay-level creationists, when they see something like a skull in an encasement, and they see that there are different colors of the skull, and that one color represents the bones that were actually found, and the other stuff represents the imagination that the scientists put in, they are not just imagining that out of nothing. Okay. There are scientists who dedicate their entire career to studying that skull and how pieces of the skull bone fit together and how that skull fits with the rest of the skeleton. So these are experts, and these are people who know how bones fit together. They studied this for years. They do research on it. They publish papers on it, and they just know their stuff. And so they can put together entire skeletons based on just a couple of bones because they know so intricately how the bones fit together. So the idea that Lucy's been around for as long as she has been, and no one has actually re-looked at these bones and switched it around, that says a lot to me as someone who's not an expert in this area. And so it's going to take a lot for me to say that these scientists are so biased that they literally put bones together in the wrong way. I'm not confident by any stretch that that's the case. So not to say that I just go with whatever the experts say. I know there's a lot of controversy around that. There's a lot of experts who say dumb things, a lot of scientists who say dumb things, but like the experts who are brought on to examine these bones, they know their stuff, and they say that these bones are put together this way. And I know the response is, well, they're revolutionists. They wanted the skeleton to say this. And, you know, I always want to be mindful of scientists' bias, but I just don't see that as compelling enough to just refute what these experts are saying. But that's just my spiel on that. But one case in which, to move on from that, one case in which Christopher Rupe will move away from what the new creationists say, right? The new creationists who think she was a bipedal ape is, I'm trying to find it here. He talked a lot about this in his presentation. It's the finger bone. So apes actually have these finger bones that are curved, okay? And, you know, apes have that. And Lucy also had that. So Lucy, even though there's evidence that she walked upright, she had these finger bones. That's another reason to think that she was still an ape. See what I'm saying? So she has traits of apes and some traits of humans. That's why she's thought of as being a transitional fossil. But there are creationists who would say there's a whole family of apes called the Australopithecines that are upright walking apes. And then there's a family of humans with the genus Homo. That genus, those are all humans. Homo means human. Australopithecine means upright walking ape. Australopithecines are extinct. Homo, we still have some species that are around, and we do have some species that are extinct, right? Homo erectus is extinct. Homo sapiens neanderthalensis is extinct. That's a subspecies. So you get my point. Homo naledi is another one. So there is a group of Homo. Those are humans. A group of Australopithecines. Those are upright walking apes. Christopher Rupe comes along, and he says, yes, Lucy is an upright walking creature. She walked upright because of all these fossil characteristics that you creationists point out, the creation scientists, the new creationists side with. Yes, you're right about that. But here is my argument. And then he takes some of the traits that make Lucy look like a chimpanzee, such as these finger bones. And he points out that there are populations of small-bodied humans. He shows the species Homo luzonensis that did have curved fingers. And this is possibly because even though they were in the genus Homo, they're humans, they had curved fingers, and they probably actually climbed trees very well, kind of like a chimpanzee, but they were a population of humans. So he says, even though they do have the finger curve that seems to indicate it's chimpanzee, what if the finger bone actually does not mean it's chimpanzee, and she was another type of pygmy human that happens to have that curved finger bone? So then he dives into other features that make Lucy look like a chimpanzee and reinterprets those as being pygmy human. Another argument he makes, and I haven't actually read this whole paper yet. The other argument that I'm familiar with is because I was at Creation Research Society over the summer, and I saw Chris Rupe give his talk that was basically this paper. And by the way, he preceded immediately a scientist who was going up there to present on Lucy being a quadrupedal ape. So the room was filled with people because everybody was ready to see him give his talk on Lucy being human. And then the next scientist is going to go up and give a talk on Lucy being an ape. And then there is me in the audience as one of maybe 2 or 3 new creationists who we kind of accept the idea that Lucy was a bipedal ape, right? She was an ape that walked upright. And we're sitting in the room watching one person say she's entirely a human, and another person say she's entirely an ape. And we're kind of sitting there going, this is why we think she was an upright walking ape. And so that's right there. We saw them get back-to-back talks. So Chris Rupe goes up. He's very energetic. He knows he's going against the grain here, and he knows he has a limited time to give all of his information. So he goes up there and he basically yells at the audience the whole time. He's his voice is raised. He's very energetic. He's flying through PowerPoint slides of all of these things, and every trait that makes Lucy look like a human, he's emphasizing, and every trait that looks like an ape, he is reinterpreting. So it seems when you watch him go about doing that, and he goes through really quickly and does all this, it very much looks a little bit like cherry picking data, because he's just picking things over here and says this is true, but he's picking things over here and says this is misinterpreted. And I'm not saying that's impossible and we can't reinterpret some of the data. It is possible. It could happen. I just want to be said that he has this theory in mind first, and now he's just going through all of the data that's been published on Lucy and interpreting it all to fit kind of his framework. And one of the things that I have heard that has been kind of debunked, he pointed out that basically the discovery of Lucy, they discovered, the Johansen that he keeps citing, they discovered a lot of bones, and some of the bones were Australopithecines and some of the bones were Homo. And originally, they had a mix-up in terms of how they classified them, and they had to move some of the bones. They originally classified a lot of the bones as human and then moved them to Australopithecines. So Chris Rupe points that out, and he's like, they saw them and they looked human, and then they moved them to Australopithecines. So maybe they were right the first time, and they should have been classified as human. And I do know, as I've talked to some of the people after his talk, that he did misrepresent some of that information. At least I've been told that. Again, I'm not the expert here, so I'm listening to all sides of this. And so he gave a good presentation, and I have nothing against Chris Rupe, and I like him a lot, and I talked to him very, very briefly afterwards. But so he's kind of making his argument, and then there have been some people who responded and said, well, and the reason they moved some of the bones over is they said, well, these bones look like they're human size, but what if it's because, chimpanzees have sexual dimorphism? Not just chimpanzees, but all apes and Australopithecines. They have sexual dimorphism, so the male is much larger than the female. So some of the bones that they classified as human originally, they said, well, what if it's just because of sexual dimorphism, and so they moved them into the ape category. That was Chris Rupe's argument, and that's not exactly what played out. So they did move some bones over, but it doesn't actually really help his argument that Lucy herself was a pygmy human. So anyway, that's probably something I should get into in a future video if I do more on Lucy and more on Australopithecines. But basically that's there I am laying it out for you. This is the controversy, is that some creationists believe that the Australopithecines are upright walking apes. Some creationists believe that they were apes who walked on all fours. There's nothing separating Lucy from a type of like chimpanzee. She was a ape that walked on all fours. And now there's this new idea that's going to take creationism by storm that says Lucy was a pygmy human. So again, those are the 3 options. I think he has I know there were some people who were impressed and convinced by his arguments and have been swayed to think that Lucy is a human, whether she is or not. I'm just giving you the different perspectives. So it'll be interesting to see what creation organizations do with this information, whether this becomes the dominant viewpoint for, say, Institute for Creation Research or Answers in Genesis. It's getting a lot of pushback. It's getting a lot of praise already. Again, the very next presentation at that conference, someone was arguing completely the opposite position, that Lucy was a ape walking on all fours. And I will say I didn't find that presentation all that convincing whatsoever. It rests a lot on the idea that the original people who found Lucy completely misrepresented a ton of the data simply for their own personal agenda. And again, I've already said my thoughts on that, but these are professional scientists who know way more about these bones than I know of literally any subject. And I don't think even if they wanted Lucy to be exactly what they're claiming Lucy to be, even if that's what they wanted, I don't think it's enough. Like, I don't think they would look at bones and just intentionally put them together the wrong way, or that they would just have these glasses on that says, oh, Lucy must be this way, and they just kind of sloppily put it together the wrong way. I don't find that very convincing. So, Chris Rupe's idea is very interesting. I know there's a lot of pushback on it. It'll be interesting to see what this is like moving forward. Again, I write for New Creation, the New Creation blog. The New Creationists are very much on the Australopithecines as a walking upright ape. They're upright walkers, but they are firmly in the ape category. They are not humans. And that's kind of the position that I'm going to take for now. But we'll stay tuned. I mean, we'll cover this story. This is a big development in creationism, and we'll see where it goes from here. So now it's on your radar. You can check it out, Creation Research Society Quarterly. The whole paper is there. And yeah, that'll kind of do it. So we have a trailer for an upcoming creation movie. I'm not a huge fan of it, but I gave my thoughts on that. And very similar to a project that I had done earlier this year, gave you my thoughts on that. And those are my thoughts on the new Lucy theory. So we'll see where it goes. I'm not an expert, but I will keep you updated on it and explaining to you all the different positions. And hopefully, maybe by next time, I will read up more on it. I will do some more sketches in my notebook, and I'll be more of an expert the next time we cover this topic. But for now, stay safe out there. Thanks for tuning into the Creation Reformation YouTube channel. Hope you have a great rest of your day, and I will catch you next time.